Today's question asks, what are some signs of child abuse and what is the responsibility of someone, an adult, who is suspicious of that? Now, before we move forward, just a trigger warning, some of the stuff mentioned in this video may be distressing to some viewers. So we're talking here in this video particularly about physical abuse. There are different types of child abuse, sexual abuse and emotional abuse, domestic violence. But in this video, we're talking about physical abuse inflicted on the child. What are some behavioral signs? So we all know the physical signs, right? Seeing the actual injury, seeing the marks on the bodies, on the body. But today is about the behavioral signs of physical abuse. So here are some signs. If the child comes up to you and tells you, I am being abused, then it is our responsibility to believe them and to look into that matter and not just brush it aside as if it is not true. So we need to, initially, we need to believe them. Another sign is if there's an inconsistent or unlikely explanation of the injury. So you might see a massive, injury on the leg, for example, and they just tell you, I just tripped in the corridor, for example, and you know that that scratch is only done if you're being dragged through cement, for example. So inconsistent explanations or unlikely explanations. Usually children aren't good liars. Another sign, behavioral sign, is the inability to remember the injury. So you might see a massive injury, and it's unlikely that you'll forget that, how that happened, right? And they might say, I forgot. But this is a sign. Another sign is unusual fear of physical contact with adults. So they have, an extreme fear of adults, being around adults in an unusual way, right? So you might see them running away, they're crying, wetting their pants, when they're in contact with adults. This is a sign. Another sign is wearing clothes that are unsuitable for weather conditions, to hide their injuries, right? So it might be 40 degrees, 35 degrees in summer, but if the child is wearing, let's say, a massive snow jacket, or a bomber jacket, this is a sign. Again, I'm not saying that these are 100%, this means that they're 100% being abused, but these are signs of that. This is what we see coming up. Another sign is reluctant to go home. So they do not want to go home. There's you see them really scared to go home. They're very reluctant to go home. They might want to prolong their stay. If they stay at your home, for example, they might say, can I stay the night here? I mean, kids ask to sleep over. Know the difference, right? But you can see it in their tone of voice. There's some fear there. And they're like, please don't take me home. I don't want to go home. Stuff like that. Another sign, if you see the child, absent from school habitually, so they're, regularly not in school. You might see them in the mall, the shopping center. You might notice that they're just not going to school. It's important to check in and see what's going on there. Overly compliant, very, very extremely shy, very passive and uncommunicative. Someone who is very shy to speak. Usually the parents will have put the fear of, not the fear of God, but the fear of them in it, in the child, and really now this child is just scared to speak without approval. That's a sign. Unusual, nervous, hyperactive, aggressive, disruptive, destructive behaviors is one. So, for example, hurting themselves, so like self-harm, destructive behaviors in that way, or even hurting others, using objects like knives and things like that. Usually that child would have witnessed that before, hurting other people. So that's a sign. Another one is self-harm, injury, cutting arms, cutting themselves. This is a sign that there may be some abuse at home, or other underlying issues like depression or even anxiety. Another sign is drug use. Even in children, you see them using drugs. This is a sign that there may be something going on at home, some physical abuse, and attempting suicide. This is not an exhaustive list. These are some of the main signs, behavioural signs of physical abuse and other forms of abuse that's going on at home. It's your responsibility just to check in and follow them up whenever you see this, and to believe the child. I hope you found my video to be helpful. As I always say, be compassionate to yourself and be compassionate to others.